I'm a professor of biology at University of Toronto and the director of the Centre for Urban Environments. And the Centre for Urban Environments created the Junior Naturalist Club that we'll tell you about in collaboration with a local charity in our community, the Riverwood Nature Conservancy. The vision in creating this was really trying to connect kids with nature. In connecting kids with nature, the principle here was regardless of the kids' background, regardless of their starting point, we wanted to make a place for them in our community. Because as you may know, if you've ever been to Toronto, who here's been to Toronto area? It's a very big place. It's very hard to get outside. It's very hard to connect with nature, and it's getting harder and harder and harder. And I think that's true across Canada because 82% of Canadians now live in cities. And so if you grew up in a farm, you're very fortunate. Fewer people are having those experiences where they get to connect with nature directly. And so we're having to find ways, creative ways, in our cities. In Mississauga, where we live, this is the 6th largest city in Canada, right beside Toronto. We have 700,000 people. It's getting harder for these kids to connect with nature. And that's what we wanted to do. But although we started this in Mississauga, the vision now in connecting kids with nature is trying to do this coast to coast to coast, trying to take this show on the road, as it were, and try and share our experience with other people and show them how they can also create one of these naturalist clubs that can connect kids in their communities. And wouldn't it be amazing if every single community in Canada had a naturalist club that was connecting kids with nature? Imagine how we could change this country and people's appreciation and understanding of nature and the importance of the environment if every single community had a club where kids could actually get outside and learn about nature with people that know something about it. So before I get into kind of how we did this, I just want to briefly mention why is this important. I think this will be intuitive to many of you, but in thinking about kids' development and well-being, I think naturalist clubs and getting kids out into nature can contribute to their development and well-being on multiple levels. So this includes their cognitive development and well-being, so they're learning stuff, and they're having fun while doing it, and they don't realize, how advanced some of these concepts are that they're learning. Their physical development and well-being, so getting kids out there and trying new things and getting exercise and going on hikes, and we'll show you some examples of that. Also, we know more now than ever how important it is getting outside in nature for emotional and mental development and well-being. And so this was, although we were shut down for a while, this was a critical resource for many of the kids in our community and families in our community. Social, so these kids meet people with like interests. And one of the reasons that we created this is when I was growing up, I was a geek. I loved nature. I loved going out and catching frogs and looking at plants, and I didn't know any other kid. And when I shared that with other kids, they made fun of me, right? And so I learned not to tell people. When they come to our club, they realize that, hey, there's other kids that love doing this as well. And they can see, adults and professors, and you can actually have a career where you catch frogs for the rest of your life. Wow, that is the best job in the world. And then, although it's contributing to all of this in terms of development and well-being, I think this is also really important in a time when we're trying to learn how to make Earth more sustainable and our country more sustainable. We're using resources faster than they're being created. It's really important that we try and create stewards of the Earth. If they understand nature, if they love nature, even if they don't go into a career in it, we're more likely to have citizens, people that really care about it and try to protect it. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to talk to you about how to create a Junior Naturalist Club, run the Junior Naturalist Club, and sustain a Junior Naturalist Club in your community. And there's lots of different ways to do this, and we'll hear about Sask Outdoors at the end, but we'll give you the example of what we've been doing. Everything I'm going to tell you about and more is available in this document, the Development and Facilitation of a Junior Naturalist Club, that the Center for Urban Environment's contracted and was written by Reagan, that takes you from the beginning to the end of how to do everything I'll tell you about. And Shannon's going to distribute this afterwards digitally so that you can all have a digital copy, and if there's anything you missed, you can come back to it afterwards. So let's start with how to start a Junior Naturalist Club. So there's a number of things that before you get started that you have to kind of go through and think about. These include administrative responsibilities, equipment, leadership and volunteers, group size and makeup, the meeting format, behavioral guidance, safety issues, fees, and funding. I'm going to go through each one of these in turn, so you don't have to worry about kind of getting it down right now. And I'm going to break down each one of these so you can kind of think about or understand kind of what you need to think about if you're interested in trying to create one of these naturalist clubs for kids. So administratively, there needs to be a champion. So if you think it's just going to be a collection of people all kind of pitching in, there really needs to be one or two people that are really willing to take the bull by the horns and lead it. The person that's going to kind of organize the volunteers and the sign up and such. And so there needs to be a champion. And then administratively, when you're going to start the club, you need to think about, okay, how are we going to advertise? How are people going to know about it? You know, here's this great thing you're creating, but you need to get the word out somehow. And we'll talk about how you can do that. The ways that we've done it, so initially we went to community events and had, with the Riverwood Conservancy, had little flyers. Hey, we're starting this club. If you have a kid that's interested, please feel free to register. We put it out on Twitter, starting Instagram, through email networks, different listservs in our community. We advertised in the city, at the libraries. They had a free service where you could put little advertisements up. The Riverwood Conservancy, which is the charity in our local area within our city, was also sending it out to all of their members. And then we started to also have little business cards, because as we'd go around with these bright shirts, people would say, "Who are you? Like, what are you doing?" And so it was much easier to say, we're the Junior Naturalist Club. If you're interested, just send us an email. So then in the advertising, then thinking about how to register. And for this, I think it's really important for registration, keep it simple. There's a lot of resources out there that are completely free, and you want to be very clear and easy for people to register. If the harder you make it, the fewer people are going to sign up. And so, this is for the last Naturalist Club we were talking to about how to create something in their community. I just created something for them in 5 minutes on a Google form. There's a lot of other details here, but as simple as what's the email, how many children, what's your child's name, and then going through the different issues or pieces of information that you'll need on safety and such. It's very easy to make one of these forms, and it's very easy for people to fill them out. In terms of equipment, this doesn't have to be complicated. You could start a naturalist club really without anything, just getting people outside. But I'd say if you're going to get any piece of equipment, one piece of equipment, jars. And they could be from the local pharmacy, or from something that's just super easy. People can donate them. So this is how people can look at different things. And then I'd say the next piece, if you get a little bit of money, or if you have some money from registration, having some nets. And we'll show you how to use those nets today and kind of what the kids can see with those nets. If you have access to more money, of course, it's always nice to have more things. So, having little magnifying glasses, they're not that expensive, but they can open up a whole new world to these kids that they can't see with their eyes. Binoculars. We do have binoculars in the group, but we actually don't use them a lot because it's hard for kids to use binoculars. It takes a lot of instruction, and they often find it very difficult to see things a long way off. And there's other pieces of it. We have microscopes and such, but you don't need all of that if you don't have the resources for it. And so you can keep it simple. And as you acquire more resources or donations, you can acquire more things that can add to the program, but are not 100% necessary. In starting the Naturalist Club, you're going to need both leadership and volunteers. I talked about the champion. That can be as simple as one individual. In our case, Reagan is our champion. We co-lead the organization or the club, but she really does all of the administrative work, and I show up and I get to be the fun guy with the kids for about 2 hours, right? Volunteers are so key to these clubs, and people really want to connect kids with nature. You know, a lot of people feel very passionate about this, and I think this kind of shows that the fact that you're here, you know, that people really care about this topic. So attracting volunteers, this can be a whole group of different people in your community. I'd say the best source are students. You are extremely lucky living in Regina. You have the University of Regina. There are dozens and dozens of very qualified undergraduates and graduate students here who would love to connect kids with nature. And they have a lot of knowledge. Some of them are experts in their field. They have a lot of knowledge to share. And so tap into that. So for example, you know, here's some of our kids here, and here's 2 PhD students. This is one of the world experts on dinosaurs, and so he often leads fossils. This is a world expert on remote sensing to look at changes in cities through time. And they're amazing with the kids. We make use of some of our undergraduate students at University of Toronto, Mississauga. So this is Albert, who is just very, you know, I identified him because he was walking around campus with a butterfly net, always strapped to his back. I'm like, okay, we need to talk. As our kids kind of age out of our program, we ask them if they want to be junior leaders when they go into high school. And so this is May, who's one of our junior leaders, holding up salmon eggs during our salmon run when we go and look at the salmon spawning. And we also make use of some of the experts in our community on kind of one-time only basis. So this is Santiago Claremont, who is a research scientist at the Royal Ontario Museum, showing the kids an extinct ivory-billed woodpecker that's in their collection. And you can't see it, but you know, this kid's face is, because he's looking at an extinct species right in front of his eyes. And often these experts in the community are more than happy to spend a couple of hours donating their time to helping kids, just like they were kids at one time, learn about the science that they love. Of course, when doing this, an important aspect is making sure that you do vulnerable sector checks. So this is a requirement in Ontario. It does vary province by province, but you want to make sure that there is some type of police record check for all of your volunteers. In starting the Junior Naturalist Club, you'll have to make some decisions on group size and makeup. So, you know, I'm giving you examples of what we're doing. You'll have to find something that works for yourself and for your own energy and abilities and things. Some people want groups that are really small. Some people want groups that are really, really big. And you have to find what is the right balance for you. Meeting format, in our case, we set it at 20. And then we said, oh, you know, this is easy. Let's go up to 30. We can reach more kids. And we found it was just way too much. And we found, you know, this was taking these 30 kids to the Toronto Zoo. We always do one outing with them. And then the CEO of the zoo was touring us around, which was fantastic. But we just found with 30, we want to be able to have a lot of quality one-on-one interaction with the kids. And the quality of that interaction went down when we had more kids. 20 we found is our sweet spot. With the meeting format, you have to think about in an area like this, are you going to have indoor, outdoor, a hybrid of the two? We initially started with a hybrid, so we would do indoor and indoor every 2 weeks, outdoor once a month. And we've now transitioned to doing completely outdoor. We'll probably do some more indoor stuff at some point because there's some things you can do like looking on the dissecting scopes, certain activities that are a little easier indoor. But for what we're trying to achieve, getting kids connected with nature, what better place than being outdoors? So regardless of the weather, our principle is always, there's no bad weather, there's just bad clothing. Whether it's torrential downpours or minus 30, you know, we're gonna be out there. Although we don't often get minus 30 in Mississauga. But we would still be out there. Safety is absolutely essential, so there always has to be at least one person that has CPR training in our sessions, and making sure that kids are safe in that way. And also when they register, making sure you have any information that's necessary in order to keep those kids safe, whether it be allergies or certain conditions. And then fees and funding. So you'll have to think about, okay, how are we going to sustain this program? So it needs to be financially sustainable, right? And it needs to be accessible to all families. And that was the two principles that we're working on. We have to find a way that All families, regardless of their background and financial ability, can access the club. But we need to be able to price it so that it can keep going. So there's lots of other funding opportunities that you can find in your communities that may be intuitive, some of them may not be. Universities or colleges are often happy to invest in community engagement. You know, they see this as an important outlet of knowledge and working with their community. So our university, University of Toronto, funds each year part of the Junior Naturalist Club to offset some of those costs. Naturalist clubs, you know, connecting kids with nature is a great way to raise money, and so donations, many members of those naturalist clubs would be happy to give a little bit of money to purchase nets or magnifying glasses. The TD Environment Fund is a fantastic program. That was the first grant we got that it enabled us to purchase a little bit of equipment and bring down the registration costs. The Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada actually has a promo science program, which is all about connecting science with communities. And so, not for this program, but for other programs at the Riverwood Conservancy, we'd be able to get as much as $75,000 in some of those grants. So that's a big source of money if you want to connect the science with community organizations. Municipal governments, I think you've found, you know, Regina and the province can often be very supportive of these types of programs. They can always be more supportive, of course, but you know, they can be a source of financial support. Conservation authorities, we have a series of conservation authorities, and one of their mandates is trying to connect people with nature, and so they might be able to pitch in depending on what you have in your community. So that gives you a little bit of background on the things you need to think about and go through before you start the club. Then, yes, go ahead.
I have a question about insurance and how
Sure.
you manage that.
Yeah. So insurance, we have insurance through the Riverwood Nature Conservancy. So they have a blanket insurance policy for all of their programs, which I forget the exact amount, but it's in I think it's the $2 to $4 million range for liabilities. So, but it's a very important consideration, absolutely. But it can be affordable. So moving on to how to run a junior naturalist club once you've kind of gone through those initial steps of thinking about what type of naturalist club you want to have in your community and how you're going to register them up. So first of all, you've got to set the schedule. Different people will want to do this in different ways. The way we do it is we have 2 to 3 sessions per year because we like to have several meetings within each session. Usually in our case, we have 8 to 12 bi-weekly meetings per session. You could run a session where every session is a different set of kids. In our case, we get the same group of kids each session because we're trying to give them an in-depth experience into a diversity of topics within nature. So every single meeting has a different theme, okay? If you're having a different set of kids every single time, maybe you can do the same program each time. It's a big trade-off on whether you want to go deep on knowledge with a smaller group of kids or reach more individuals with fewer sessions. This could be, you could scale it for 2 to 3 sessions or 3 to 4, however you want to envision it. We picked topics within each session with the following principles. First of all, that they're exciting topics that the kids are going to really enjoy. So for example, you know, reptiles and amphibians, a big one, fossils, even wildflowers. You know, most kids aren't super excited about wildflowers until we bring them out there and show them the amazing world of these plants and what they're doing. We make sure that we pick topics that represent a diversity of topics. We make sure that it's feasible in terms of the knowledge base that we have as leaders and also the season in which we're working on. So we're not obviously going to do wildflowers in the middle of winter in Saskatchewan, but we could do it right now. Make sure that the topics we're reaching and talking about are age appropriate. And so, you know, with these 4, kind of using these as guiding principles as we pick those topics and make each one of those sessions. In terms of group communications and running the program, Regan handles all of these communications. So we make sure that they're clear, prompt, and regular communications so all the families know exactly what's happening at all times. We send out the schedule early so they can plan it out through time. And we make sure that our volunteers sign up at the beginning, so we always know which volunteers are going to be out for each meeting, and making sure we have the appropriate ratio of volunteers or adults to kids based on the local laws for your area. So we often have 4 to 5 volunteers at a time, sometimes as few as 3, but we have to have a ratio of about 1 to 5. We send out weekly meeting notices and updates so everyone knows gets reminded, so they see the schedule at the very beginning, but then they're reminded each week as it's coming up, and any special instructions that they need for that week. When we actually go on a walk, the key elements of the walk are giving clear instruction, so making sure that the information is understandable and reachable. Making sure that these kids are doing hands-on learning. Whenever I'm talking at the beginning or at the front of the kids or in a lecture hall like this, they would be bored stiff by a talk like this, right? And so making sure that they can get in there and try things. And they let me know very fast when they're bored. And so, they're often the best litmus test if you're kind of seeing what they're experiencing and feeling. Another thing that we've learned through time, a key element in a successful walk and program is giving the kids free time to explore. Not always just teaching them everything and telling them what to do, but allowing them to explore in their own way, in their own vision. And making sure that there's a diversity of topics that get covered, not just between the sessions, but within each walk and meeting. So with these key elements, when we go on one of our meetings, they're always 2-hour meetings. That's kind of the perfect timing, I think, for the kids. 1 hour can be a little short. We can't cover a lot, but in 2 hours, we can really cover quite a bit. I always wish we had a bit more time, but I think 2 hours is the sweet spot. And we run these meetings in one of 2 ways. We either do it as a full group where we're always moving together in a group, or we have stations. And it depends on the topic, but also the location, whether stations are amenable to it or not. So for example, in this case, and I'll give you an example of both, we're going from point A to another point B. In this case, we were at the Royal Ontario Museum where we asked the local experts on dinosaurs, we asked the local experts on insects and on plants, and they went between each of those scientists, small groups of 5 to 6 kids, to see, I think in this case, this is like a Triceratops femur that the kids were getting to touch with Professor Dave Evans. So as an example for the full group example, this is a program that we ran just this past May. It was called Wonderful Wildflowers. And we always start the meeting in the same way with an opening where we have the kids in a great big circle and ask them, what was your nature observation of the week? What did you see since we last saw you out in nature, anything at all? Some of the kids are really into this. They're always waiting to give their nature observation the next week. Some of them are, struggling to find what to talk about, but anything is fair game. So we get a lot of squirrels, and that's always easy, or worms. What's that? Grass. Sometimes, yes, and that's fair game. And others are just can't wait to give us the list of things that they've seen since the last time we saw them. So after the intro, in this case, we had 2 to 3 stops where I was talking about plant biology. So, why are the plants flowering right now? We're in a forest. There's tons of species that have their flowers out. What is it about this time of year that they're flowering? So I explain that to them. Then the next stop, telling them about, okay, why do plants have flowers? What's the whole purpose of this? And, explaining them and not sugarcoating the biology, always telling it to them straight. This is about sex. The plants are trying to reproduce. This is not about trying to look pretty. This is about trying to produce seeds and getting their pollen to another flower. And then the kids at first are like, oh, he said sex, right? But if you just give it to them straight and tell them the biology, they're like, okay, you normalize it, right? They understand the biology, they start to learn about this, and then you show them the sexual parts of the flower, like I'm looking at the male sexual organs, the pollen, right? Or the pistil, the female sexual organ. But after 3 stops and then telling them about a few species, this is where one of the kids said to me, are we gonna have time to go out on our own? Because they're used to that, right? And so I was like, okay, clearly I need to change kind of, and reading the group, don't always just be completely to the script. Right after that stop, I was like, okay, they've reached their maximum. So we gave each of the kids a magnifying glass, just one of these, and said, okay, now the challenge is go out into this forest on your own. And I gave them the parameters where they could go to and find new flowers you have not seen yet. And for those that you have seen, I want you to look at the sexual parts, the male and the female sexual parts, and describe them to me. And they love this. You know, they could have done that for 2 hours, frankly. And it became like a real-world Pokemon Go game. I found a new flower over here. Come on over and check this out. And so everyone would come out, and they found a species that was actually endangered, which was amazing, that we didn't know was in that forest lot. And so I made them all kind of not even touch it, and everyone's protecting it. And then they're telling their families about it when they got back to at the end of the meeting. With our group, we don't let the parents come for this age group because we want them to be independent learners and learn how to do these things on their own. Then we have one or two more quick stops of things that we're seeing, and then we always halfway through have a snack break that's 5 to 10 minutes. And at the snack breaks sometimes make into a fun game, a little trivia of, okay, what's this flower? Something that we've seen, and we have 2 different teams, and they enjoy that. Then in the second hour, we switch it up a little bit. We have fewer regular stops. So we talked about invasive species at one point. And then we did an art project where Regan led them through. We went to a patch of trilliums and draw what you're seeing using these chalk. And any way you want to portray it, you put on there. So very few instructions other than use the chalk and show us what you're seeing. And the kids, you could drop a pin and hear it in the entire forest. They were just completely engrossed in this and doing something different. And then at the end, we have the meeting close. And we end the way we started, in a big circle. But now it's not about, okay, what was your natural observation since we last saw you? The question becomes, what was your highlight of the meeting? Always trying to have them kind of hone in on what were the 1 or 2 things that you enjoyed the most. Trying to get them to think back to, okay, what did I just learn? Or what was really fun? And at this point, the parents are often around, so they get to hear, wow, they got to do this and that and the other thing. In the stations example, so in this case, I'll just go through this very quickly. Same format, but we rotate smaller groups of kids. So this was incredible insects. And at one station, we do monarch tagging, and they get to learn about migration and community science and the story of how we learned about the migration routes and why we're still studying this. A different station, we actually weren't looking at insects. We did plant presses at this station where they created their own little presses of different plants that they're seeing out there, making sure that they're collecting common things in a local park. And then a third one where they were collecting their own insects in different jars, and then they brought them back for a big show and tell at the end, which was very exciting because they found everything from praying mantises that were crawling all over them to this huge orb-weaving spider that, while I was holding it for everyone to see, just sent out this huge plume of silk out into the air that just went over the kids' heads. And you could see all of their mouths kind of went down, and all of the parents just kind of recoiled in fear. So with these walks, just remember that the key elements are always this clear instruction, hands-on learning, free time to explore, and getting this diversity of topics. In leading these walks, safety always has to be of paramount concern and planning. So we always have a first aid kit, and we have, every single walk, some kid has a little boo-boo, and they have to go immediately to Regan, who, usually just patches them up, and they're good to go again. Water and heights are always something that we have to be aware of. We don't shy away from the water, but we make sure that when we're going to water that we are doing it in a safe manner, and that we have lots of volunteers, especially for individuals that need a little bit more supervision. Behavioral guidance, there's always going to be some behavioral issues that have to be dealt with, and we kind of practice the 4 C's, being calm, clear, consistent, and caring. It really isn't effective to kind of shout or yell, and so we make sure that we always deal with these situations with a very calm approach and calm voice, but be very clear about what the issue is and what needs to happen in order to fix the issue, being very consistent in how we deal with these on a continuing basis, but also be really caring. So a lot of our kids are in our program because they need to find new outlets, alternative ways of learning and engaging. And so kind of understanding and being very compassionate about that's really important and to the success of the group. And we find actually, through the group that for many kids, it's a very calming experience. And we see their behavior with us really changes when they're out in nature. An important principle to us is that people with any physical ability are there, the kids that love jumping off the highest point to the kids that need wheelchairs. And so this is something that you think about, how can you accommodate this wide range of abilities? And so in one case, we had to have extra volunteers, making sure that the kid was taking safe risks, but also when they were uncomfortable, that they had the extra support there in order to experience it the same way every other kid in the group is. We also do have all-terrain chairs on site. We haven't used them yet, but they're there in case we need them. Of course, there's lots of allergies from bees to different foods, and making sure that you're aware of what those are so that the volunteers and the leaders of that particular meeting are prepared for any eventuality. There can often be natural dangers. We're all familiar with poison ivy, and there's lots of other plants, and just being aware of what those are and making sure the kids are, not being scared of them, but making sure that they're respecting them. And so, we recently were down a path that we called the path of pain with the kids that had, it had stinging nettle, it had Canada thistle, it had a wild parsnip, which can cause these huge blisters in the sun. Not shying away from them, but making sure that the kids knew how to identify them and how to respect those plants. And then finally, it's really important that there's always a minimum of 2 adults present at all times with any child. And so just making sure that you have that ratio and that there isn't any time when a single adult is alone. So finally, how to sustain a junior naturalist club. So once you've kind of gone through all the steps and you're starting to run it, hey, these kids need this long term. There used to be a junior naturalist club in Toronto, Canada's biggest city, until about the 1940s. And then it's been defunct until 2019. And I think they've lapsed again. They had a group that started the same year that we started the Riverwood Junior Naturalist Club because of COVID. I'm not sure if they've come back yet, but a city that has 3 million people didn't have a naturalist club, right? We need to find ways that we can sustain these, not just one naturalist club, but a city like Toronto or even Mississauga could probably have 5 or 6. So maintaining your membership, social media can be really important so that people are aware of it. Surveys to make sure you're getting feedback, to make sure you're offering a program that's valuable to the community, and learning what would make it even better. We just got a great comment from the session that just ended. One of the families said, hey, why don't we have a year-end party or an end-of-session party each time? And we love that idea, bring the kids together and celebrate what they've just done. For a long time, we were giving members priority registration, so if they had been with us before, letting them be the first ones to re-register. We think that this actually now creates inequity within our community, so this is something that we've stopped doing. So it's something that you may want to think about whether you want to do that or not. We let them know that the registration is coming. Our issue is that the Junior Naturalist Club has become very, very popular, and so it fills within the first hour. And so we just want to make sure everyone gets a fair opportunity because we now have hundreds of members from the past. We like getting testimonials so that we know about the program, but it's also very helpful in getting future grants if you have testimonials from your members. We haven't used this, but a great idea if you're having one of these sessions where it's the same kids, bring a friend. Let other kids know about it. We have promotional videos and photo galleries that go out over social media so that people can kind of see what is happening, what we're doing. And also, I mentioned the business cards. So when we're out and people ask about it, are they on the table? Okay. Hey, how do I get to be a part of this? Just give them a business card and ask them to call you. Fees are really important to the sustainability piece. So we set the fees to allow for, as I was kind of mentioning earlier, the full cost of the program. So if we don't have bursaries, we make sure that the fees can cover that. Growth through time, and we also try and get financial bursaries to bring those down. So the University of Toronto Mississauga provides that little extra money so that we can make it accessible to everybody. Sustainability also really depends on leadership, as you've been learning. As people move on through different things, and being able to hand off that leadership is really important. And so we have junior leaders. So Oscar's been with our program for a number of years now and is now going into high school. Ours is tailored for grades 3 to 8, and so as he goes into grade 9, he's now a junior leader within the club. And so this is May, who's also aged out and is now a junior leader, helping whenever she's able. But then some of our volunteers have, because our program became so popular, we were able to offer a second session. And we picked some of our top volunteers from the past. This is Kelly Murray Stoker, a PhD student who specializes in aquatic sciences. And this is Tim Fernandez, who's also a PhD student who's a fish biologist. And they just led a second session themselves as the leaders. And so, some of these volunteers can then actually become leaders within the program. Our group the first group was tailored to grades 3 to 8, but at some point you may want to offer more continuity in ages. We often have people just dying to get into the program, and they'd actually lie about their age in order to get in the program. But offering opportunities for age groups that are outside of there, I think, is important if you have the capacity. And so Reagan's actually starting the mini Naturalists this summer, where it's ages 3 to 5, to give parents and their toddlers, so the parents will be part of this program, so you're not just dropping the kids off, and both the parent and the toddler get to experience the program together. We haven't done this, but we do have an interest bringing this to teens, and this is kind of where Shannon can actually speak to it, because she's working with kind of ages 15 to 18, and it's a different group, different interests. And so they can be a little bit more independent. You can also do some things that are a little bit more complex. So as a quick summary, this is all about connecting kids with nature, the kids that represent Canada today. And I think as so many of us live in cities, I think this is becoming increasingly important, that we try and create and foster this interest and love of nature within kids, regardless of whether they're living on a farm, out in the bush, or in the city. And so what we've covered is kind of how to start the Junior Naturalist Club, run the club, and sustain a Junior Naturalist Club in your community. And you can learn all about this in the document that'll get distributed to you afterwards. And with that, I think I'd just like to say thank you very much.